Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of individuals that we've talked about here on the channel before. And that of course would be SNEAKO and MoistCr1tikal. The last time I covered them was over a year ago at this point, I believe. And that was when they first kind of got into their little spat. However, a lot of things have changed since then for mostly SNEAKO, I'd say. And the fact that he's done his whole thing with Islam, and most notably, which is most important to this video actually, which is him seemingly arguing against the legal age of 18. Now look guys, I'm going to be honest with you, this debate didn't really make much sense to me at first because, I mean, for one thing, I don't know why anybody's questioning the legal age of what an adult is here in the United States. I know that in most other places of the United States, like other states and stuff like that, the age of consent is like 16. And just in case you're lost and you need to look it up, the age of consent is basically just the age in which somebody can say, yeah, I want to have sex with you. And you know, if I'm being honest here, I feel like the age of consent should be raised to match that of the legal age, which is 18. Because in my opinion, if you're old enough to promote yourself on OnlyFans and open up OnlyFans altogether and do all this other explicit stuff that other people do online at the age of 18, then the consent should also match that. But going back to the debate, I really don't know how or why this happened. I'm assuming that this is coming off of the heels of the Chris Tyson situation. I know that prior to this, SNEAKO was having some clips on his stream kind of going viral talking about how MoistCr1tikal was waiting on making a response to the entire Chris Tyson situation because he was trans, but in juxtaposition to the Dr. Disrespect situation, according to SNEAKO, it was much quicker. So I'm assuming that that's how the debate started in the first place. This wasn't announced on Twitter. It was honestly a surprise to me. The whole thing is 3 hours, and honestly, you really only need to watch the first maybe 2 hours of it, because then they started going in an infinite loop, and neither one of them either got through to the other, so it was kind of unproductive. A lot of people are saying that Charlie lost this one, and I would have to agree. However, I don't think it's because Charlie's wrong, more so is that he's not really a debater, he's a commentator, and there's a huge difference between the two. There's a difference to giving your opinion on a situation and having to defend those points against somebody who's done more research than you while they're streaming, while they're live. And throughout the debate, you could also tell that MoistCr1tikal was kind of arguing from an emotional standpoint rather than one that was factual. And no, of course, that's not me trying to glaze SNEAKO or anything. SNEAKO said some stupid ass shit too. Like for example, in this clip that I'm about to show you right now, where he tries to bring up how people lived 200 years ago in the United States and what the laws were back then. Just take a look for yourself.
Like let's in high school. Before we even get into, let's define these terms before we even get into this conversation. What is a child?
I would use the age of consent. Under 18 would be a kid in my eyes.
So a 17-year-old who's 364 days, that's a kid?
Yep, I'm gonna use very hard set terms. If it is under 18, even if it's 17 364, that's still a kid.
That's a kid. Okay,
I think it's important to have these hard lines in the sand where it doesn't have this kind of wiggle room.
Okay, why does that define kid?
As I said earlier, at 18, at that point, you're going out of high school, you're going to college, you're living on your own, you're no longer, you know, a child under your parents' roof, for the most part, extenuating circumstances, of course, but at that age, you are starting to become independent. You are no longer just in your parents' household a kid. You are now going off into the world on your own.
You do admit that that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people graduate high school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone as that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like a lot of the things you say, can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because, I mean,
I don't think anybody thinks
clips that I played in the video, you were saying like the age of maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip. So like for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become an adult, correct?
Yeah, legally.
So you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest to, like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
It actually hasn't, right? 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of marriage...
Yeah, we can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we play by those rules? Because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying, you're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10 and the UK was 7. Right? So if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, then the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college, they don't leave the house until this age. Their brains don't develop until they're 25. Your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money. They're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you could use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
Okay, so the reason why I'm saying what SNEAKO brought up was stupid is because you cannot judge the people of the past by today's standards, all right? That's just a general rule of thumb when you're looking at history or past events, okay? So 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it doesn't matter, okay? Judging somebody back then by today's standards would be insane. Like, for a good example, right? For cultures back in 1500s, 1600s, right? Where you had grown-ass men marrying like 12-year-olds and doing sexual acts with 12-year-olds. Obviously, by today's standards, that would get them in jail, rightfully so, but back then it was normalized. You could say the same thing with like capital punishment, right? One of the punishments for committing regicide was to be drawn and quartered and have your corpse hung on London Tower. And obviously that's a very inhumane way to go about things, and so we've evolved another method that uses a more humane way of killing someone to make them pay for their crimes. And while we might think of those ways as barbaric now because we don't do them anymore, we see past that. If you really think about it though, it's judging them by our standards today. It doesn't really make sense because that stuff was normalized and that was kind of a spectacle back then too. A lot of people would gather together and kind of watch as someone got ripped open or whipped half to death. Hell, you could even say that about a lot of ancient civilizations such as the Roman Empire. Hell, if the Roman Colosseum was a thing today, Peter would be having aneurysms up the ass. Like, if we're being real, bro, as I was watching this entire debate, some of SNEAKO's points kind of started to sound to me like a guy who was caught sexting a minor. Like, oh, well, the age of consent is basically 16 in other places, so it really doesn't matter, right? Kind of trying to defend his actions, right? Like, it doesn't make sense.
I'm talking about your personal beliefs. Do you think someone in their 20s should be able to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
To someone in their 20s should be, I mean, I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would do it. The maturity for people in the teenagers in the West is getting much worse, but there are...
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for, and I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore, anyone, do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Well,
why would I tell them if everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
But they're still, like, they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that. Like,
another thing that SNEAKO missed about this whole situation, right, is the fact that minors can't consent or make life-altering decisions on their own, not like an 18-year-old can, because they're more likely to be manipulated than an adult is. And here's the thing, too. Me personally, I think that SNEAKO arguing against the age of 18 being the legal age is an issue because I feel like the government kind of, you know, even though they do have a lot of dark spots in their history, they kind of got this one right. If I'm correct, people stop growing or stop maturing at like 20 or 21, maybe even 25 in some cases. I know it's different for everyone, so that's why I'm kind of like the ages from 18 to like maybe 23, 24 is the sweet spot to where you can start to unlock your adulthood privileges that are given to you legally.
My definition is anything under 18.
That's exactly what a child is.
Yeah, I think that is a great line in the sand. If you are under 18, you are a child.
Your scenario earlier was if a 16 and a 21-year-old, if both parties were if the father was okay with it, the mother was okay with it, why not? Tell me a reason why that's wrong. Because you're getting...
One is a child, one is not a child. That's the point.
Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting, as you agree with.
Okay, so as long as everyone...
If your parents are okay with it and you are okay with it, I think that's totally a familial decision to make, yeah.
Okay, so... a child can cut their penis off and take hormone blockers and change their biology forever, but they can't get married?
And so here's the clip that kind of made me want to look into this debate even more. And this is kind of why MoistCr1tikal lost the debate in the first place. And it was because earlier in the debate, before that clip that I just played even happened, the topic of the debate switched to the age of marriage. SNEAKO brought up a point how in Islam you're supposed to get permission from the father first and then get a blessing from the family and then you can marry the girl. Charlie obviously wasn't in favor of that because it's like a guy who's over the age of 18 can still marry a girl who's under the age of 18. But MoistCr1tikal didn't even mention the fact that the guy in question can still manipulate the family and the minor into thinking it's a good idea to marry. Like, the reason why it's so important to have the age of consent or these different types of boundaries is so that children or other people don't get hurt. And I understand that at some point in the debate, SNEAKO's argument kind of switched to the government can't control morality because morality in the government's eyes always switches. It's something that's always updating, and that you need to be able to trust a moral system like, for example, the Bible, or in his case, Islam, that doesn't switch, because you cannot ground morality without God. So, I mean, surprisingly, I didn't think that SNEAKO, even if he had a debate, I didn't think that he was going to win one. All the debates that I've been seeing about SNEAKO, he's usually had terrible points, and they just usually come from a lack of understanding, but for some reason, he cooked the fuck out of Charlie, bro. Like, I mean, like I said before, he's not a debater, he's a commentator. There's a huge difference between giving an opinion on something and having to defend that opinion versus somebody who has done research on a specific topic. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for me today. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button. If you want more content similar to this, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one. Sub up, stay safe, and peace.